Right, Abusian, obe like video no one share the more before na ono so nya bi etumi ahwe na the case between Kwabena Adumuah ne Ghana mine egusu a ekoso na ehu update bi aba mepese ye begibre na yakwakotie abra Paul Adumuah etimi biebie nsem so a enya asem ketua entie na yenso yenkyere adwen emfa ho.
Attorney General Dominic Ayini, should I move on? And the Deputy Attorney General, side, the two of them are prosecuting. We also know that Attorney General had already done the very bizarre thing by holding press conferences and almost certainly pronouncing the accused as guilty when that was not really part of his job. His job was to prosecute and allow the court to pronounce guilt. Tonight, the case has run to a certain level. It has gotten to an important threshold, an epoch. What is that epoch? When criminal trials begin, the prosecution will usually present their case. Presenting their case means that they will tell the court why they are prosecuting the individual, and then they will bring people, they call them witnesses. So prosecution witnesses. So when you go to court and you hear they say PW 16 is the 16th prosecution witness, P for prosecution, W for witness. So PW 1 up to wherever they choose. And the prosecution has the liberty to choose whatever they want. So the PWs have been interviewed. Interview means that they will call their names and then they will stand in the dock, and the Attorney General or the one prosecuting, they call it examination in chief. They will ask them questions and then try to guide them to sort of give evidence and backing, give evidence and a lot of backing to the statements that the prosecution have made. When they have given this examination in chief, the lawyer of the one being prosecuted is allowed to ask them questions for clarification, to observe contradictions, and also to bring out certain information that will hopefully build up the case of the defense. When that has finished, and that is where they are in the Adumuah case, that has finished now. When that has finished, then the defense counsel will also call its witnesses. And then when they come, the defense counsel will ask them questions, and he will be hoping that in asking them these questions, they will be dislodging the matters that have already been put before the court by the prosecution's witness. When defense counsel asks those questions, the prosecution is allowed also to cross-examine. In fact, there's a third level to it. If you ask your examination in chief and there's cross-examination, you can request the court that at the end of the cross-examination, you want to ask more questions, and that's called re-examination. So let's get that facts together. I'm going to show you what is happening in the Adumuah case, and you will be completely blown away, viewers. Let's move on. Now, there are two things that we need to learn today before we move on, yeah? It's about the standard of proof. So when you go to court and they say you have to prove beyond reasonable doubt, what is the proof that this, where is the evidence that, all that conversation is about the proof of the matter. P-R-O-O-F, proof of the matter. So there's something called the standard of proof. The standard of proof investigates what should be the level, how much should we prove, what is the burden. If we say that Paul Adumuah visited Professor Jenana Opoku-Agyeman yesterday, assuming that that is a crime, and we want to establish it, to what extent should we establish that? Should we be able to have a photograph of Paul Adumuah standing in Jenana Opoku-Agyeman's house? Should we also add trace his phone so that the GPS will show on his phone that the phone was actually in Jenana Opoku-Agyeman's house? That may not be a complete proof that he was there with the phone. But if we can go ahead to see that he made a call at 9 o'clock and he spoke on the phone, and at that time, the GPS showed that the phone was in Professor Jenana Opoku-Agyeman's house, then we are getting somewhere. So the standard of proof is, to what extent should we prove that this happened or that didn't happen? So, standard of proof. This is from Black's Law Dictionary, so you can always check. It's a law dictionary called Black's Law Dictionary. You can just Google it and find out. The standard of proof is the level of certainty and the amount of evidence required to prove a claim in court. It dictates how convincing the evidence must be for a judge or jury to decide in favor of one party over the other. And this is the important part. The standard of proof dictates how convincing the evidence must be for a judge or jury to decide in favor of one party or the other. So the standard of proof is by and large legislated upon. So what is the standard of proof? And what the courts and the Anglo-American common law have done is that they have just separated the standard of proof into one standard of proof for civil cases and another standard of proof for criminal cases. So let's get there and find out where we are. Okay, so this is the standard of proof for civil cases. What is a civil case, by the way? A civil case is the one that doesn't involve the government and the Attorney General. It doesn't involve the police. The Attorney General can also sue in a civil action, yeah, but normally when we say a civil case, it's between one Ghanaian and another. It could be one foreigner who has right to practice business in Ghana and he's angry with something he's suing. So two civilians, two individuals, no one is calling police to arrest anyone. Criminal cases are different. Criminal cases are prosecution by the state against an individual. And the state is involved because one individual has reported to the state that another Ghanaian or some foreigner who has to be in Ghana has done something against me. That's something that he has done against me. You will find it in the Criminal Offences Act. There is a document called the Criminal Offences Act where all prohibitions have been listed. So if you go to the Criminal Offences Act, which is Act 29 of 1960, but as amended, you will find one, they say stealing, they define it. This, they define it, defrauding by false pretenses. So if the action that has happened can be found in the Criminal Offences Act, you are free to go and report to the police that this person has stolen my money. The police will prosecute. That's criminal prosecution. So this is the civil one. On the balance of probabilities, what does it mean? It is the standard of proof used in civil court cases. It means that a claim is more likely to be true than not to be true, or that there is a greater than 50% chance that the event occurred. And I like the way they put it. So in civil matters, I'm suing Professor Jena Nopokwajiman, or I'm suing Kwesi Pratt, or Kweku Baku is suing somebody, or somebody is suing Haruna Atta or something, if individuals are suing each other. What they are expected to do in court is that they would have to show that there is a greater than 50% chance that happened. So when the judge is looking at the evidence, he's trying to see whether there's a more than 50% chance that happened. So, for instance, a case against a civil matter where Paul Adumuah has been sued, and I am saying that I wrote a letter to President John Dramani Mahama on the 16th of May. And then I am saying that's my defense, that the legal action against me evaporates if it is true that I wrote a letter to President John Dramani Mahama. So somebody is saying I've done something. I said I haven't done that because I wrote a letter to President Mahama. So the court is now looking at a civil matter. So more than 50% must be established. So the court finds out that they say that I wrote a letter to President John Dramani Mahama. I say yes. I said I wrote a letter to President Mahama. Then they come and say, where is the letter? I bring the letter to the court. The court looks at it. They admit it in evidence. And then the people against me say that, listen, you said you wrote this letter to President Mahama. I said, yes, I did. And you signed it. I said, yes, I signed it. They said, okay. That was on 23rd May. I said, yes. Okay. So they bring another letter. They say, okay, this letter, which was written in 2023, when you were a board member at the National Communication Authority at NCA, you wrote it. I said, yes, I wrote it. They give the letter to me. Can you recognize? I said, I can recognize it. You wrote it, I wrote it. I said. It says your signature here is very different from your signature, the one you are saying that you wrote a letter to President Mahama. So the court will now look at it. 50-50. Then the judge says there is a more than 50% chance that Mr. Adumuah, you didn't write the second letter. You didn't sign the second letter. But you signed the first one. But there's a more than 50%. Because if you look at this one, look at your signature. That's all they need. Just greater than 50%. Now let's go. So that's standard of proof for civil. It's just, you just have to do a little bit. You just have to cross the line, the 50% line, and you are there. And you would have established your case, and the court is expected to give it to you. Let's move on to criminal. Now, it says beyond a reasonable doubt. What does it mean? It is the highest standard of proof used in criminal trials, requiring the prosecution to present evidence so conclusive that no logical, sensible person will question the defendant's guilt. Viewers, that's very important. Let's take it slowly. I beg you, forgive me, it's late in the night, but let's get this. It's for our country, okay? It says that beyond reasonable doubt is the highest standard of proof used in criminal. It's always used in criminal trials, like the Adumuah trial. And it requires the prosecution to present evidence so conclusive that no logical, sensible person would question the defendant's guilt. So you have to present a conclusive matter of the defendant's guilt. So let's go back to my example of the letter. Assuming that I'm being prosecuted, and I say that, no, I wrote a letter to President John Dramani Mahama. I wrote a letter to President John Dramani Mahama. Or the prosecution comes and says that, Mr. Adumuah, part of your offense is that you wrote this letter to President John Dramani Mahama. So I look at the letter. I said, no, I didn't write this letter. Then they said, but you wrote it. I said, okay, my lord, look at the way I write my A. When I'm writing my name, Adom, I write my A in a certain way. This one, the A is not written that way. I have raised reasonable doubt about the admissibility of the letter that the prosecution is using against me. Because they would have to establish it beyond at 100%. The least thing that you take out of it, if they establish it by 99%, the prosecution should fail. Any prosecution where the prosecution is established by less than 100%, the prosecution should fail. They have not been able to establish guilt beyond reasonable doubt. So I needed us to understand this foundation before we get into the Adumuah trial and what has been happening so far. So with that, now let's get into the trial. All right. So what has been happening so far, the Dominic Ayeni and Sremsai, both of them are attorney generals. Now, this is the story. According to the Attorney General Dominic Ayeni, Adumuah and his co-accused orchestrated a scheme to misappropriate approximately 49.1 million of public funds through a criminal network of companies and bank accounts. The prosecution contends that money earmarked for the procurement of a cyber defense system was instead diverted for personal and private use. However, during cross-examination by defense counsel, a number of admissions emerged from the prosecution's own witnesses that challenge allegations made publicly by the Attorney General, as well as the prosecution's narrative in court. So what is being said is that what is the gravamen of the matter? The foundation of the case is that the Attorney General is alleging that Kwabena Adumuah and his people had blown 49.1 million of state money. And the money was earmarked for the purchase of a cyber security equipment, cyber system equipment. And the equipment was never bought. And the money has been lost. And therefore, there's a loss that has been occasioned to the National Signals Bureau. And that is why he's being prosecuted. This is the matter. During his press conferences, which were completely unnecessary and which has not caught the court's attention in any way. Nowhere in the court documents has any press conference been referred to. The Attorney General has not referred to his own press conference. It all means that the press conference was neither here nor there. It lacked quality, it lacked interest, and it lacked relevance. But Attorney General did the press conference anyway. In his press conferences, he was talking about how Adumuah had spent the money. In fact, he told the press how he believes Adumuah spends that 49 million. He talked about him having cars, all of which brought Shatawale into the matter. You remember they had to go and arrest Shatawale, and Shatawale later told the public in his own videos that they told him that he should say that the car is for Adumuah, and he couldn't say that because it's not true. So he, Chatta, SM, he's a truthful man. Truth stands. Truth is one. He told them that I can't say something that's not true. I am very basa-basa. I'm sure that's what Shatta said. That is bad man. Me, I be basa-basa, but I don't go feel lie, So he couldn't say that the car is for Adumuah. This was part of the narrative of the Attorney General when he talked about they said Adumuah has houses and he has cars. And now they were fishing to find out the evidence so they can put it together. So they arrest a popular musician and tell him that your Lamborghini is for Kwabena Adumuah, and the matter now spills over, it evaporates, and that side of the conversation is dead. But this is the story against Adumuah. You have blown 49 million. Now let's get into the cross-examination. So how does the case start? The case starts with a jamboree arrest of Kwabena Adumuah, as if after arresting Adumuah, everything will change or something like that. Guy comes from a trip abroad, they arrest him, they keep him in for whatever time. The court is constituted at evening, 4 o'clock, so that he will be kept in. All of that happened. Forget about that. Now the trial has started. The trial starts with the Attorney General and his people presenting their prosecution witnesses to the court. And so far, they have presented about 4 or 5 prosecution witnesses. Viewers, keep in mind the gravamen of the case. Adumuah, through a network, has stolen 49.1 million. On trial is also Adumuah's wife, who is also on trial, that she's part of the syndicate of the stealing. Let's get to what has been happening in the court so far. Can I roll it over, please? Let's turn it out for me. All right. Now, this is a testimony by Ruth Edith Adumuah, who is the head of finance of NSB. Please, let's read. Ruth testified that there was no public institution known as the Bureau of National Communications, BNC, as alleged by the Attorney General. In the Attorney General's presentation, viewers, he said that there was something called Bureau of National Communication, BNC, and that there were 2 BNCs. There was a public BNC and a private BNC. That Adumuah siphoned money from the public BNC into a private BNC, which was created by him and his wife and his cohorts. That's what the Attorney General told the media. In the courtroom, the prosecution witness, which is Edith Adumuah, who worked with Kwabena Adumuah as the head of finance, and who was also harassed, but eventually was converted into a prosecution witness so that perhaps she can tell on her boss or something like that. She's the first one they brought. So she knows a lot about the whole transaction. She's head of finance. She knows everything. And this is what she said. She testified that there was no public institution known as Bureau of National Communication as alleged by the Attorney General. Before then, let me say that if you do an algorithm of what has happened in the court so far with the testimonies, you will find that there has been at least 61 contradictions of the Attorney General's statements in court. If you do an algorithm, things have become very modern, viewers. I mean, even law was not like this, but now law is like that. So they've put all the evidence together, and the algorithm is telling us that there have been at least 61 contradictions of what Dominic Ayine and Stremsai first told the world about this case. Once the case went into court, where there's no drama, it's not about camera, it's not media proficiency, it is about the facts and the truth. And there, 61 of the things Dominic Ayine said are proven to be contradictory. Let's move on though. So she testified that there was no public institution known as the Bureau of National Communications as alleged by the Attorney General. Number 2, she stated that the BNC was an internal department of the Office of National Security, National Security Coordinator, and not an autonomous agency like the Bureau of National Investigations, BNI, and the Research Department. So she said that the BNC, it works in the Office of the National Security Coordinator. There's no private one. It's one and it's with the National Security Coordinator. It's just a subset of it. It's not an institution by itself. The Attorney General said all of that. Okay, let's move on. Then she further testified that what the Attorney General held out to be the state's BNC account with the Fidelity Bank was rather a special operations account of the National Security Coordinator called the Coordinator's Account. National Security Coordinator. That's the National Security Coordinator, also christened Director BNC. So, viewers, are you with me? It's getting interesting. The prosecution witness told the courts that, as it turns out, the Attorney General completely misunderstood what he noticed. Both the Attorney General and the investigative unit, I don't know whether it was the BNI or the NIB as it was, or it was the YOCO, whoever investigated, they had all gotten it wrong. But how did they get an investigation wrong when the person who is giving the right information is a prosecution witness? Didn't they speak to her so that she will educate them and say, oh, bosses, this is not how it is. So this one is like that. Didn't they go through that process so that they come and embarrass themselves in court? This was totally embarrassing. That your own prosecution witness under cross-examination is revealing things that contrary to what you told the general public. And that's what is happening in the court. Let's move on. She also said that contrary to the Attorney General's allegations that Adumuah had the power to spend and authorize spending on the Fidelity Special Operations Account, Edith testified that it was the National Security Coordinator who wielded the power to spend and authorize spending on that account. Again, Dominic Ayine said that Kwabena Adumuah moved accounts. They saw the Director BNC and they thought he created the fictitious account. And siphoning government money into that account. That's what they believed, or that's what they were told. And then they said it. Now, the lady is telling the court that Adumuah does not have control over that account. But mind you, she's the head of finance. She's speaking. Said Adumuah doesn't have control over that account. That account is for the National Security Coordinator. All right, let's move on very quickly. The bedrock of the Attorney General's case is that Adumuah moved monies from the Fidelity Bank accounts to the UMB Bank. But Edith Adumuah clarified that Adumuah did not wield the power to move any monies at all. And thus the check totaling 49.1 million were signed and authorized by the National Security Coordinator for payment into BNC operations account at the UMB. Again, Edith is giving more clarification. Let's move on for lack of time. Edith Adumuah's testimony further contradicted the prosecution's case in terms of the purpose of the 49.1 million, citing that there was no point in the year 2020 when the said amount was the Ghana cedi equivalent of 7 million. You remember there was something like that where the Attorney General said that the 49 is the Ghana cedi equivalent of 7 million. Edith debunked that in the court. Edith Adumuah contradicted the prosecution further by asserting that the acquisition of the cyber defense system was a genuine transaction in which she herself, as head of finance, was involved. Edith Adumuah contradicted the prosecution further by asserting that the acquisition of the cyber defense system was a genuine transaction in which she herself, as head of finance, was involved. She confirmed that she personally processed invoices and payments for the cyber defense system. She maintained that the payment was made contingent on the delivery and acceptance of the cyber defense system. She testified that the cyber defense system was indeed purchased and delivered. That collapses the Attorney General's case. Because the Attorney General says money was given for the purchase of a cyber security. The cyber security didn't come. So recently before the court, distinguished counsel for Adumuah, the learned Atta, has asked the court that, can you order for us to walk into the National Security Signals Bureau and check whether the equipment is there or that is not there? I'm really hoping that the judge will agree with that because it will help all of us. The Attorney General says it wasn't there. The Attorney General's witness says that the item was delivered. I signed for it. I paid for it because I'm head of finance. Counsel for defense says, my lord, if it wouldn't worry anybody, can we all go to the National Signals Bureau, your agent, the judge's agent, the Attorney General, who already has control over the Signals Bureau, and we, the Defense Council, you can add neutral people, the leadership of the Ghana Bar Association, and the leadership of the new one, Dafiam Apos owned, what is it called? Association of Ghana Bar or something like that, Solicitor Ghana something, their thing, he and Javier Susu. You can bring all of them. Let's go to the National Signals Bureau and let us find out whether the equipment is there or not. It's an application before His Lordship. I sincerely believe that His Lordship will grant it. I hope so. Anyway, let's move on. Contrary to the Attorney General's allegations that some 49.1 million had been stolen or lost at the National Signals Bureau, Edith Adumuah testified that there was no report or audit query whatsoever that any such amount had been stolen or gone missing at the National Signals Bureau. She denied ever transferring monies to buy houses for Adumuah. She denied Adumuah ever using operational funds for personal use. That's very interesting. And on that day, I was in court, and that was the most powerful one. Atta is such a fantastic lawyer. I mean, all of us had not thought about it. You see, so the lawyers were talking about it in the court as I sat with them. It's very interesting. The first point that Dominic Ayini should have made to the court is to establish that as National Signals Bureau, they are looking for a 49.1 million which is lost. That's the first thing you should have established because that's really the case. You are prosecuting on behalf of the National Signals Bureau. There has to be a complaint from the National Signals Bureau or an audit from the National Signals Bureau by the Auditor General, like what goes into Abena's committee, Abena Osasare, that's very intelligent MP, Public Accounts Committee. So that the Attorney General can begin on the premise that the Auditor General has reported a 49.1 million inconsistency or loss with the National Signals Bureau, alleging that a cybersecurity equipment, that can be the basis of the Attorney General's case. The Attorney General didn't do that at all. He was more interested in press conferences and addressing the media and telling the media that people are thieves and prosecuting a public opinion trial for political gain. That's what he was interested in. Now all that gain has collapsed because time is the master of all of us. So all that political gain that Attorney General thought he gained, it has collapsed on his head today. The other day, somebody was whispering to me that they said that Dominic Aini had some issue and he wanted to resign and they begged him not to resign. I said, oh, well, he's brought it upon himself. Because this is what is happening. Everything he said in the press conference has now collapsed on his head. Every pep, the military people call it peps, I think they were. Every pep that he won because of the press conference has been torn off his shoulders today. Because he held a press conference and said that there was no equipment and that the money had been stolen. And yet, when he appeared before the court, he did not ground his case on the fact that the National Signals Bureau itself is in possession of that information that their money has been stolen. So in court, Atta asked the lady that, are you the head of officers? She said, yes. He said, if there will be money lost, would you know? She said, yes, I will know. She said, so far, has the National Signals Bureau lost any money? She said, no, we haven't lost any money. Then Atta turned to the judge and turned to the court. So what's the Attorney General looking for? The people at the Signals Bureau in the testimony before the High Court, sworn evidence, said that there's no money lost to the National Signals Bureau. But the Attorney General says that there's money lost. And this is the Attorney General's witness. And the witness is the head of finance. And if there's money lost, she would know. But she said that no money lost. Dominic Aini was not there, but Sremsai was very there. He was sitting there. He shaking his head, looking at his time. I was spying him. One day I'll do video of him and come and play it, you see. But I think that's unfair. That's why I've not done it. He was sitting right there. He heard it. Everybody in the court heard it. Everyone was shaking their head. And people wanted to clap for Atta. It was such a great twist in the matter when Atta told the court that, my lord, you've heard her. There's no money lost. Anyway, so this is it. The contrary to Attorney General allegations, Edith testified that there was no report or audit query whatsoever that any such amount had been lost. Meanwhile, the National Signals Bureau has been audited. Every year they get audited by the Auditor General. In fact, if they haven't been audited in 2025, they have been audited. So the Attorney General can pick up the 2025, which is the John Mahama administration, pick up the audit report of 2025 and come and tell us that the Auditor General in 2025, whilst he was auditing the National Signals Bureau, found out that 49 million is lost. Dominic Aini and Sremsai have not been able to do any such thing. Yet they are in court prosecuting. So let's move on. Edith Adumuah stated that no 49 million has gone missing at her department, contrary to the claims by the Attorney General. She further stated that no query had been raised against Adumuah internally in the national security. Now, we are going to another testimony. So, Adumuah, until the prosecution, in fact, even up till now, is still an employee of the National Signals Bureau. Yes, he is. I think now they've asked him to take a long leave or something like that. But by the time they began the prosecution, Adumuah was still a staff and the director of the BNC. He was still there. And the Edith, in her testimony in Atta's cross-examination concluding questions, was asked whether there's been any inquiry in the office about Kwabena's, the accused person's conduct, and the answer was in the negative. Nothing. Let's look at Mildred Donkor. After her conversion from accused person to prosecution witness, Mildred Donkor testified that her assistant to Adumuah and his wife was part of her professional duties as a banker, rather than criminal actions as originally alleged by the Attorney General when she was the third accused person. She used to be third accused, now she's on the prosecution side. She, Mildred Donkor, maintained that she acted lawfully in carrying out those banking duties. She confirmed that the authorized withdrawals would ordinarily appear in court in official bank statements, debunking claims by the Attorney General that the withdrawals were concealed. She confirmed that the transfers were reflected in official banking records and not underhand dealings. She testified that the Advantage Solutions, that's a company, the Advantage Solutions was incorporated in 2008 and not a recent undertaking to steal money. She confirmed that Advantage Solutions was an existing company before she joined it. She testified that Advantage Solutions funded national security special operations as far back as 2018. Contrary to the Attorney General's allegations that the accounts of Advantage Solutions were used as conduits to steal money, Mildred testified that the Advantage Solutions rather loaned monies to the national security to pre-finance special operations. She confirmed that the payments to the ICS Holdings Limited for the procurement of a cyber defense system was a genuine transaction backed by a SWIFT record. SWIFT is a banking term for foreign money and all of that. She testified that the 16 million fixed deposit was done on the BNC operations and not in Adumuah's personal name, as alleged erroneously by the Attorney General. She testified that she had been coached. She testified that she had been coached during IOCO processes and that her witness statement was prepared after reviewing the charge sheets with her lawyer. Well, there was a conversation here about at which point her charge sheet was reviewed. And Atta came to the conclusion that she may have been coached. We don't know yet whether the court will draw that conclusion, but that's the conclusion that was drawn by defense counsel, that Mildred, you have been coached by IOCO. That's in the court's record. We wait to see what the judge will say about that. She confirmed that she was detained and later granted bail before becoming a prosecution witness. Okay, so that's Mildred Donkor. I think that is that all. Yeah. Okay, so do you have some more? Okay, so then there's also currently ongoing, that's just ended. In fact, it was happening today when, as you must have read online, on CTFM Online, Doomsaw affected the court. So in the middle of Atta's cross-examination, that ended. Now, the guy there now, who is there, Cromwell, Mr. Cromwell is the investigator. And Mr. Cromwell has been saying certain things that I see that the same side people have been publishing, hoping that it helps their case in the court of public opinion. Now, Mr. Cromwell has been saying that the salary of Kwabena Adumuah, 5,000 cedis a month in 2018, 9,000 cedis a month in 2019 or something like that, cannot possibly buy the properties, some properties. But here is a real question that Adumuah's lawyers are asking. The Attorney General and the prosecution have failed to bring the said properties to the court to demonstrate that the properties that they heard of by gossip, that the properties are truly Adumuah's properties. Because Advantage Solution, which is Adumuah's wife, is into property business. What they do is that they secure land and then they auction the land for people to build on the land. Sometimes they can build for you. You know that arrangement is all over. Sometimes they can build for you. Sometimes you build and they supervise. Most of the estate-gated communities are like that. And this is the business that Advantage Solutions, which is led by Kwabena Adumuah's wife as chief executive since 2008, have been doing. And so those houses that Advantage Solutions have claim over, 90% of it is not for them. It's for other people. They are a platform that is just putting people's homes there. So they have some homes, but they don't have the 35 that you go and see in the community. 90% of the 35 is not for them. It's for other people. So when they saw that and they saw Advantage Solutions, then they put it together that it must be Kwabena Adumuah's property. It is this matter that Cromwell has come to the court and Atta was cross-examining him, and he's saying that the salaries of Adumuah doesn't match the acquisition of those properties. But those properties are not Adumuah's acquisitions, and there's no evidence to that. So, you see, viewers, that's the thing with court and criminal prosecution. This Metro TV building here, we are in North Region, Accra, very nice building. When we were constructing this building, I was coming here every day. So if somebody was sitting there and says that, this thing is for Paul Adumuah, every day he comes there. Can't you see that when he comes, then the people who are working, they call him boss, boss. When he's about to come, they say, boss, a bow. Then they are in a hurry, they are doing the mortar and they are putting the iron rods because boss is coming. If you look at that, then you go and say in court that the Metro TV building is for me, you will be laughed at and laughed upon, because whether a building is for somebody or not is a legal question, and it's a question of documents, and it's verifiable. There's only one basis on which you can say a property belongs to an individual is that it's registered in his name. That is all. Nothing more, nothing less. The fact that I came here every day when they were building it, the fact that I was coming here, sleeping here, the fact that my brother is the engineer who did it, the fact that it was my sister who was the painter, all of those facts are inconsequential to the document that determines who is the owner of the property. So that's what has happened. Gossip has gone around. But hey, Kwabena Adumuah and his wife, they have money. Hey, this property here, all the houses are for them. I'll show you something. Every Saturday morning, Kwabena comes here, I'll show you. Then Saturday, say, Charlie, have you seen him? Have you seen that? That's Kwabena Adumuah, the guy at the Signals Bureau. You see that he's inspecting the house. The house is for him. So, Oral, which Dom Level said is garbage, sits down and somebody goes to Oral, raises his hand, he's Kofi Mensah Edionum. Yes, what do you have? Kwabena Adumuah is a thief. There are some houses, I can go and show you the houses. Then they follow him, chuku, chuku, chuku. They go to the place, they look at the thing, then they bring it in press conference. A whole lawyer, PhD, Dr. Dominic Aini, a whole brutal lawyer, Stanford University. Oh, boy, yo, what is going on? Stanford University. This gossip, you come and stand and do press conference and say that it's for Dominic Aini. Now you are in court. And Cromwell has started by saying Adubuah's salary doesn't match. We are waiting for them to bring the evidence that those properties belong to the said Kwabena Adumuah. They should bring it. And then they don't even start with in building your case to the court. You start with the properties first before you come to his salary. They have begun with the salaries. What is going on? Stanford. Oh my goodness. You know, when we were young, we all wanted to go to Stanford because J.H. Mensah was trained at Stanford. Those of you who are much younger, you don't know J.H. Mensah. J.H. Mensah was trained at Stanford, and he talks about Stanford quite a bit. I used to live near him in Teshinungwa Estate. I'll go to his house every morning. And J.H. was always talking about Stanford. So Stanford went into our heads. So when I got to the Faculty of Law and Dominic Aini was teaching, and I heard that he went to Stanford, I would go to his office and go and have a conversation with him about his green Volvo and all of that. He had a nice green Volvo that, I like nice cars. I'll be talking to him about his car. In Stanford. When he became Attorney General, I sat on this program and said that I think this is the best decision John Mahama has made. I didn't know. Viewers, forgive me. I didn't know. Hey! So when the press conference started, I said, was there something going? So I called other people who know him that, Dominic, why? But this is where we are. This is what is happening in the Adumuah case. So at this stage, and that is why I started with the definition of the criminal standard. At this stage, even at this stage, without fear of contradiction, somebody can say that the Attorney General has already failed the threshold of beyond reasonable doubt. He's long failed it. In this trial, he has long failed it. Because when things that you are saying are being contradicted by your own witnesses, wherein lies your case? But let's see what happens. You see, I got a call from somebody abroad. He says he wants to interview me about my book, and he's a PhD student. And he asked me a poignant question. He said I should give him the 2 reasons why Ghana's democracy... You can take the story out, Michael. He said I should give him the 2 reasons why Ghana's democracy has succeeded. And the 2 reasons I gave him why Ghana's democracy of the Fourth Republic has succeeded, he said 2. One is the behavior of the courts, especially the Superior Court of Judicature, the High Court, the Court of Appeal, and the Supreme Court. The decisions they've handed down since January 1993 is a major reason why this republic is still where we are. And we have to be grateful to the judiciary. That's why I don't joke with judges. The other day when they were teasing Justice Bafoboni that he went to work, I didn't want to be part of it. Because Justice Bafoboni is Chief Justice, you see. So the judges, they've done very well for this republic. So I heard it on Newsfile, and I was happy that Ansansari was able to say the things he said that it was really wrong for Justice Bafoboni to do that. But the judges, the Superior Court of Judicature have been a major backbone to this Fourth Republic. That is one reason I gave him. The second reason I gave him is the magnanimity of our election losers. How our election losers have responded since 1992 to their defeat in the election. And 1992 was bizarre because Professor Adumuah and the group were so angry that they boycotted Parliament. All this is out, Michael. They boycotted Parliament, you see. But then look at 1996, and we have shown documentaries of it. John Ajekum Kufuor, on the inauguration of the President Rawlings, even though many MP people felt the election had been rigged again, he went to congratulate Rawlings on the stage, live at the Independence Square. It was the magnanimity of John Ajekum Kufuor in those circumstances that helped this thing to succeed. And then you remember 2000, the famous Mipasumje Professor Mills, when he was being urged to challenge the 2000 results and fight, he said, no. It is even rumored that in 2004, again, when Professor Mills lost, J.J. Rawlings went to him and said, Charlie, they are cheating you. Wake up. And he said, oh, me pa sumjwe. And gradually, the sumjwe hine became, and then it catapulted him into victory in 2008. Remember 2008, Nana Addo Dankwa Akufo-Addo, 25,000 separating them. The MPP people in the hinterland were willing to come down to Accra and kill everybody for the power. Akufo-Addo said, it's okay. Let it go. He went to the Independence Square in the inauguration. He congratulated Professor Mills. So, and then you come on and on to 2016, and then to Mahamudu Bawumia's very, very gracious consideration on that morning, for which some people even blamed him that he spoke too early. But Mahamudu Bawumia looked at the figures and said, well, why not? Ghana is more important. So he came out and he came together with his wife outside their home and said, we lost the election. Congratulations, John Mahama. And everything ended. Some people use that to steal parliamentary seats, which we will take back from them. But it's okay. They stole it very nicely. It's fine. But the important thing is that Dr. Bawumia kept this country together on that very fateful Sunday morning. So, two things that have helped our democracy is the court and then the magnanimity of our election losers. I told the researcher that I'm sure he's going to find expression in his PhD. Okay, let's come back to the story. So, now, with what is happening, I like to leave you viewers with a quote. And it's here. This is a quote by what I know as Lord Patrick Devlin, who wrote the book entitled The Judge. Now, this quote I became familiar with when I was reading the case of J.H. Mensah and the Attorney General, the Supreme Court case. It's reported in the Supreme Court of Ghana Law Reports 1997, I believe it's on 346. When I read J.H. Mensah and the Attorney General, Justice Akins was one of the big judges, and his seminal ruling in the matter, he introduced his decision with this quote, and that's how I fell in love with the quote. It says, if a judge leaves the law and makes his own decision, even if in the substance they are just, he loses the protection of the law and sacrifices the appearance of impartiality. And I leave this has been one of the bedrocks of the Ghana courts in the Fourth Republic. Justice Akins, the former Attorney General who was on the Supreme Court, relied on it in one of the important cases. If a judge leaves the law and makes his own decision, even if in substance they are just, he loses the protection of the law and sacrifices the appearance of impartiality. I am really hoping that Atta will end his address with this quotation from Lord Patrick Devlin. I believe, from what I've seen with the Ghanaian courts in the Fourth Republic, that justice will be done. Because this prosecution by this Attorney General has been bizarre. It has been bizarre. And I hope, and I believe, and I pray that the High Court will come to that conclusion to save the Republic. And so that we can now know that prosecutions, if you are being prosecuted and you feel that you are being witch-hunted, the court will be there to help you. Whether it's MPP prosecuting you or NDC prosecuting you, let us establish a culture which we are already establishing, that people are confident that they can go to court. Kwesi Ahoy, the NDC man, he was prosecuted by Nana Akufo-Addo as Attorney General. In the end, the court gave Kwesi Ahoy a submission of no case. And at that time, President Kufuor was president. NDC were under pressure. They were in opposition. Everybody was brutalizing them. But the High Court stood for Kwesi Ahoy. And we saw that happen in many, many, many instances. And I believe that those are the things that have helped our republic. And I am sure that on this Adumuah case, I'm even getting sad. I'm sure that on this Adumuah case, the courts will once again, as they've always done, rise up to the occasion. And we will see something in this country. It will bind us together. It will strengthen our resolve in democracy. And we will be greater for it. I believe that will happen. If a judge leaves the law and makes his own decision, even if in substance they are just, he loses the protection of the law and sacrifices the appearance of impartiality. I leave it there. Let's move to the next story. Or let me take some text messages and see. I see people are writing stuff to me about my shirt. It was bought for me by my son and his friends. They say that they think I like these things. You know. So it was it was one of my birthdays like that, and they brought it. I like it. Did you like it too? I love it, man.